The Dragonback Series by Timothy Zahn. Book 1, Dragon and Thief. Chapter 11. After Uncle Verge's comment about breaking and entering, he expected Dracos to object to the procedure. But the dragon remained silent as Jack knelt down beside the lock. Maybe this wasn't something a noble Kadar warrior wouldn't do, though only if necessary, of course. As Jack had already noted, the lock was sturdy but not complicated. He swiveled out one of the blades from his multi-tool, a special gadget Uncle Virgil had spent hours building into one of the tool's original screwdriver heads. This wouldn't take long at all. He paused, frowning. There was something not quite right about the lock mechanism, he realized suddenly. Not quite symmetric either, actually. He leaned closer for a better look, and it was then that he noticed the extra piece of metal extending off the lock about a quarter of an inch to the right. A piece that didn't quite blend in with the original design.
"What is wrong?"
Dracos asked, his head rising up from Jack's shoulder. The lock's been wired, Jack told him, running his finger by the extra metal strip, being careful not to touch it. Something's been added to the lock, with this piece of metal here to cover it. 10-1, it's a trip line.
"What does that mean?"
It means that if I spring the lock, someone's going to know.
"Interesting,"
Dracos murmured.
"It is not part of the standard lock mechanism."
Definitely not, Jack said, shaking his head. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this on a simple storage locker. Usually, if someone wants to protect something, there are better ways to do it.
"Then why was it done?"
Dracos asked. I'd think that would be obvious, Uncle Verge said tartly, even to a noble Kadar warrior. They want to know if anyone breaks in.
"But if they are afraid the object inside will be discovered, why not simply remove it from the locker?"
Dracos pointed out.
"Why leave it inside and then create a trap?"
Uncle Verge snorted. You familiar with the word bait?
"I do not know that particular usage,"
Dracos said calmly.
"but from your tone I can deduce its meaning."
I'm so glad, Uncle Verge growled. Well, Jack, what now? I don't know, Jack admitted, gazing at the lock. I can't tell how the trip line is wired without a scanner and some better tools. Without knowing that, I can't disarm it.
"You have the necessary equipment aboard the SNA?"
Dracos asked. Sure, Jack grunted, but I'd never get it in past the customs. The Vargran colony really leans hard on thieves. So it's a stalemate. Uncle Verge sounded disgusted. Something like that, Jack said. I guess that leaves us only one option. We can open it up, take a quick look, then head for the tall grass before who's ever at the other end of the trip line gets here. He waited for a moment, hoping one of the others would either try to talk him out of it or have something better to suggest. But both Dracos and Uncle Verge were silent. Taking a deep breath, he lifted the multi-tool and set to work. Easy, lad, Uncle Verge murmured. Remember your training? Jack bit at his lip. Yes, remember his training and his experience and his methods. So much for putting the past behind him. 30 seconds later, he had the lock sprung. Dracos, keep an ear out, he told the dragon as he lifted the latch and pulled the door open. Let's see what we've got here. Well, Uncle Verge demanded. Looks like Dracos described it, Jack said, eyeing the device as he folded his multi-tool and put it away. Let's see. There's a plate attached to the bottom that says Hamker Rofsky 550. That ring any bells? Well, well, Uncle Verge said thoughtfully. It does indeed. A Hamker Rofsky 550 is a low-temperature refrigeration unit. Jack frowned. You mean like a food freezer? Colder than that, lad, Uncle Verge said. Considerably colder. Jack frowned harder. Then suddenly he got it. He got all of it. Well, well, he said, smiling tightly. Or did someone just say that? Yes, Uncle Verge said, but it bears repeating.
"If you have a thought, please speak it,"
Dracos put in. What? The noble Kadar warrior doesn't know everything? Uncle Verge taunted. How surprising! The dragon's head rose further out of Jack's shoulder.
I do not claim to know everything,
he said, his voice deep and clearly annoyed. Take it easy, Jack soothed him, closing the locker and heading back toward the maze of boxes in the center of the warehouse. They'd seen all they needed to, and it was time to make tracks out of here. Uncle Verge always likes to get places before everyone else. Just ignore him. The dragon head sank down a little.
Then explain.
It's really pretty simple, Jack said. I should have figured it out sooner. I don't know how much chemistry you know, but there are some substances that can go from solid to gas without becoming liquids first. That means they evaporate without leaving any puddles.
I am aware of that fact.
Well, one of them happens to be carbon dioxide, Jack said, which happens to be one of the waste gases we exhale when we breathe. Dracos's head lifted up.
Someone is coming,
he said softly.
3 beings, perhaps the Watchers.
Terrific, Jack muttered, pausing at the edge of one of the stacks and peering carefully around the corner. No one was visible, but if he concentrated, he could just hear the footsteps. Can you tell which direction they're coming from?
There,
Draco said, lifting his snout up and out of Jack's jacket and swiveling his head to point back toward the tube area. Ha, Jack said, ducking back into the maze of boxes and heading off at an angle. Looks like they've outsmarted themselves. They figured my ship would be in one of the closer pads, and I'd just walk straight into their arms.
You think they were waiting for you? Dracos
asked.
You specifically, and not merely someone interested in the cargo disappearance?
Who else would care about Jack being in trouble? Uncle Verge countered scornfully. Watch yourself, lad. Your friends back there reacted too fast to be any sort of cops I've ever known. Braxton Security, then? Jack asked, picking a new direction through the maze and taking another quick look around before heading off. Who else? Uncle Verge said. Let me know when you're 2 minutes away from the ship, and I'll start the engines. No, leave them off, Jack said quickly. Whoever they are, they're not going to be stupid enough to miss a ship revving for a liftoff. You're certainly not going to try to hide out in a grounded ship, Uncle Verge pointed out. You got that right, Jack agreed, breaking into a jog. We're heading into the city. You're what? Jack, lad! I'm closing down, Jack said, reaching up and pulling the comm clip off his collar. I'll talk to you later. Jack! Uncle Verge's protest was cut off as Jack shut off the clip.
Is there danger in the city?
Dracos asked. Probably, Jack said, stuffing the clip into his pocket. But not as much as there is behind us. They getting any closer? He got 5 more steps before Dracos answered.
They are not following,
he said slowly.
I believe they are moving around the edges of the stacks.
Trying to cut us off, Jack grunted, picking up his pace. Let's see if we can beat them. He broke into a flat-out run, hoping his pursuers were making too much noise of their own to hear him. Once, as he rounded one of the stacks, it occurred to him that barreling through a cargo maze infested with hyenas might not be the most brilliant thing he'd ever done in his life. He would just have to hope that they'd learn not to mess with the kid in the leather jacket. The open area around the outer warehouse wall was deserted when he finally emerged from the stacks. Dracos? He asked softly, peering across the open area toward the wide doors where the main cargo monorail tracks came into the warehouse. Outside the doors, the ground was well lit, with the lights of the city twinkling in the near distance. As far as he could tell, there was no one out there.
No one is moving nearby,
the dragon said, flicking out his tongue.
Nor do I smell anyone close at hand. This is perhaps our best opportunity.
Jack made a face. And if no one was moving or breathing nearby, but a whole bunch of men were waiting outside for him to show up? Still, if they were, there wasn't a lot he could do about it. Like their escape with Dracos's wrecked ship, all he could do was go for it and hope for the best. Right, he muttered. Here goes. He'd been mildly surprised back on Iota Clestes when more of the Brumga's friends hadn't been ready to pounce as he ran for the SNA. He was even more surprised that no one was lurking in the shadows here as he crossed the gray top and ducked through the cargo entrance. Once, as he ran across the lighted ground outside, he thought he heard a shout behind him. But the sound wasn't repeated, and no one shot at him, and a minute later he was outside the range of the lights and into the comforting gloom of night. Not that darkness alone was going to give him much safety. Darkness and distance, that was the combination he wanted. He passed the fence at the edge of the spaceport and turned down one of the streets heading into the city. They'd made it 6 blocks, and Jack had changed streets twice when Draco spoke again.
You are saying the box contained nothing except solidified carbon dioxide?
You got it, Jack confirmed, pausing a moment to look around. The last turn had put him on a narrow, winding street, lined with closely packed 2- and 3-story buildings. A few of the buildings had balconies, which the residents seemed to use mostly for storing potted plants. The street itself wasn't very well lit, and the few pedestrians he could see walking along in the distance were too shadowy for him to make out even what species they were.
I do not understand the purpose.
You said it yourself back on the ship, Jack reminded him, continuing down the street. A delicate aroma was drifting through the air from somewhere, reminding him of fresh-baked cinnamon bread. Someone wanted to frame me. The dry ice.
Pardon?
Dry ice, Jack repeated. That's what we call frozen carbon dioxide. The stuff evaporated slowly enough over the 4-day trip to Coeur d'Alene for the SNA's air system to handle the extra gas without triggering any alarms. The cinnamon smell was getting stronger, he noticed. A bakery nearby, maybe? He hoped so. He was starting to get hungry, and it had been a long time since he'd had a good cinnamon roll.
What is this place?
Dracos asked.
The smells are not those of humans.
I'm not sure, Jack said. I've only been here a couple of times, and never to this side of the port. If I'm remembering the map right, it's the Witstwaukee area.
Are they friendly to humans?
Jack shrugged. I don't think they're unfriendly, for whatever that's worth. I remember Uncle Virgil conning a couple of them once. They seemed friendly enough. Gullible, too. There was silence from his shoulder. Jack winced, realizing that last comment had probably offended his companion. He opened his mouth to apologize.
Behind us,
Dracos murmured. What? Jack asked, his apology and rumbling stomach both abruptly forgotten.
Footsteps,
the dragon said.
It is those who sought us in the warehouse.